the Art of Leadership Network.
Well, hey leaders, welcome to the LeadCulture podcast, part of the Art of Leadership Network. I'm your host, Jenny Catron, CEO of the Foresight Group. At the Foresight Group, we are dedicated to helping leaders develop thriving teams. Each week, I'll be your guide as we explore practical strategies to equip you with the tools you need to lead with clarity, confidence, and build unstoppable momentum in your organization. My mission is to be your trusted coach, empowering you to master the art of self-leadership so you'll learn to lead yourself well so you can lead others better. Each week, we take a deep dive on a leadership or a culture topic. You'll hear stories from amazing guests and leaders like you who are committed to leading well. So let's dive in and keep learning on this leadership journey together. Friends, today I am joined by Dr. Kent Schlichtemeier. I first met Kent, a handful of months ago when I had the privilege of coming out and speaking for their Servant Leadership Symposium at Concordia University in Irvine. And Kent was such a gracious and generous host. Everything he talks about in servant leadership, he exemplifies, he models with the leaders that he serves with, the educators that he leads at Concordia. And so it was absolutely a privilege to meet him in person. And I thought, we've got to get him on the podcast because this is a leader we need to learn from. Kent has enjoyed serving for over 4 decades as a leader in education. And he began his career teaching 6th to 8th graders. We have some fun stories in the interview you're going to love about that. Kent served as professor in the School of Education at Concordia University Irvine from 1988 to 2003, where he mentored future teachers. In addition to teaching at Concordia, Kent was the women's basketball coach until retiring from coaching in 1993 to pursue his doctoral degree. And that during his tenure, the Lady Eagle basketball team made 2 consecutive appearances at the NAIA National Basketball Tournament after winning the Golden State Athletic Conference champions. So he is a phenomenal leader of teams as well. And today, Kent is thrilled to serve as the inaugural director of the Servant Leadership Institute. Kent is also co-author of the book, Timeless Leadership Principles, Building Champions for Life. So friends, you're going to love this conversation. What I love about Kent is his heart and passion around the subject of servant leadership. And so I asked him the distinction. What's the distinction between leadership and servant leadership? And he has some really thoughtful responses to that. He shares how leadership really is a privilege and not a burden, and why and how we need to see it that way. He talks about the power of humility, honesty, and wisdom for leaders today, and just continues to instill in us the importance that servant leadership begins with a conscious decision to serve others first, and why and how we need to really start from that place. So we dig into a little bit of what do we see in our culture today in regard to servant leadership, and why maybe servant leadership feels like it is diminishing in our culture. So we dig into that a little bit. And he just inspires us with some really thoughtful insights from a leader who has served well, and it continues to serve well and speak into the lives of so many. So here is my conversation with Dr. Kent Schlichtemeier. Well, Kent, I have been looking forward to this conversation. You and I got to connect, quite a few months ago, and then I was able to join you out at Concordia University in Irvine. And it was just so fun to connect with you, your heart for leadership. So I thought, it's time to have you on the podcast. So thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny, for the invitation. I know there are a lot of people you could invite from around the country to talk about leadership. So it's a real honor for me to share a few ideas today with your listeners. And we're still receiving rave reviews about your presentation here at Concordia last February. So thanks so much.
It's funny because we're talking about the subject of servant leadership. And your team just modeled that so beautifully. When I got to come on campus and participate, just fun to see what you preach, so to speak, about servant leadership in action and just see it reflected in your team. So well done. That's super fun.
Thank you very much.
So I think it'd be fun because you have been in education pretty much your entire career, right?
I have.
So I'd love to hear why education? Why did you choose that as a profession? Give us a little backstory on your journey.
Yeah, I would just have to say that I always enjoyed going to school, kindergarten through 12th grade. I had great friends. I had wonderful teachers, enjoyed some reasonably good success academically, athletically, and in the activities I participated in. So school was always a fun place for me to go. I enjoyed being in school. But my great motivation, I think, the primary motivation for me to become a teacher and a coach was my high school baseball coach, who was so respected and for his humility, his honesty, his wisdom, and the way he treated the students. I looked at him and he had such an impact in my life as a young, traumatized adolescent trying to find my calling in life. And I thought if I could live my life in a way that would resemble what my baseball coach, how he lived his life, that would be a noble calling. So I really credit my high school baseball coach for inspiring me to pursue teaching after I graduated from high school.
I didn't know that part of your story. And I always find it fascinating when I talk to leaders that I really admire and respect, that there's often somebody in their life early on who modeled what I would say is extraordinary leadership, servant leadership. And that's that influence that individual had is just so exponentially great in their stories. And so that sounds like that's what was true for you with your high school baseball coach.
I really don't remember many of the words that he said to me in 4 years, but I remember the way he made me feel as a valued, appreciated adolescent. And it just is something that I'll never forget. And I tried to do that in my teaching and coaching career throughout my career.
Yeah. That's so powerful, right? Just to have that example. And I think a lot of us can also have the opposite experience, right? Of maybe somebody early in our life, in our story, who did not model those things and the impact of that as well. And so significant. I'd be curious when leadership became important to you. Like maybe was that the impetus? Was that coach, or when was leadership like a thing for you?
That's a great question. And honest, in my reflection, I would have to say that I never considered myself to be a leader in junior high, high school, or college. I never saw myself as a leader until that September 7th, 1978, when I was standing in front of my first sixth grade class of 25 students. And the bell went off, the students returned to their seats, and it was dead quiet in the classroom, and all those eyes were looking at me. And I realized for the first time that I was called to be a leader. These kids were depending on me to educate them, mentor them into successful people of strong character. And I just felt as though, wow, now is the time I'm called to be a leader. And I've got to tell you, I struggled. And I thought I was ready to be a leader. But it took me about 2 days in my career to realize I didn't know how to manage behavior. And it became a very frustrating experience being a leader. And I realized I had a lot to learn. So I was very fortunate to have very positive mentors around me who I desperately watched and sought information on how to be a successful leader. So that was really the first time that I realized that when people are depending on you for your performance to guide them, you better learn about being a strong leader and develop some effectiveness.
Kent, I love that picture. Like as soon as you started telling that story of that sixth grade class of students just staring you in the face, and you're like, oh no. I'm the only one in charge, right?
Yeah. I thought this was going to be kind of an easy career because they were dead silent. All eyes were watching. I thought, boy, I must be pretty good. But it took them about 30 minutes before they started to test my leadership abilities. And I realized I have a lot to learn.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yep.
You talked about the, just how to actually lead or manage in that environment and the mentors that were critical for you. Can you give us, what were some practical things that you learned or you did early on to start to sharpen your leadership skills? Like what did that look like? Was it just studying and reading or observing? What were some of the things you did to say, okay, I've got to learn something about this leadership thing?
Yeah. I think that a real essential ingredient in becoming a better leader is to, first of all, realize that you can get better. Every one of us can get better and humble ourselves to ask questions of very effective leaders. One of the things that I've had the pleasure of doing throughout my career is spending time with successful leaders. I was a basketball coach for many years, so I spent time with some of the best basketball coaches in the country and watched them practice and ask them questions. Before I became the dean of the School of Education at Concordia, I went out and interviewed 7 different deans of respected universities in Southern California, spent time in their offices and saw how they arranged their offices, how they interacted with their staff, and I asked them questions. And I learned that a lot of leaders lack the humility and the confidence needed to spend time with other leaders and get better. I think if we realize that every single one of us can get better, it sets a stage that it's okay to reach out to people that you respect and spend time with them in order to get better. And what I found is that leaders love to share tips with other people. I've never had anybody say, no, I don't have time for you, or what are you doing bothering me? They welcome me into their offices or their gymnasiums. The other thing, good leaders are readers, right? The most intelligent people I know are prolific readers. And so I think it's very, very important to just continue to be a lifelong learner and look for opportunities to learn through reading and asking questions of successful people.
That's good.
So, yeah. And then a lot of trial and error and being patient with yourself as you make some mistakes, experience some adversity. Every time you experience some adversity, you have the chance to bounce back and develop more resilience. Right. Nelson Mandela said, I never lost. I either won or I learned. And I think that's a great quote. I never lost. I either won or I learned. And so that's an attitude we have to embrace, I think, as leaders.
Yeah.
Because I lost a lot in those first years of classroom management and as a coach.
And 6th graders are not terribly forgiving, right? Like, I mean, that is a leadership crucible right there because they are not going to give you a lot of grace or accommodation, right, for your growth curve. Right. You know, they're pressure's on with that age group.
That's right.
That's awesome. That's good. Okay. I want to have you share a little bit about the difference between leadership and servant leadership. The servant leadership piece is such a key part of who you are and what you lead at Concordia. But I'd love to hear some of your distinctions around leadership and versus servant leadership.
Hey, I define leadership as the ability to cause positive change by influencing others to their maximum performance. The ability to cause positive change by influencing others to their maximum performance. And I applaud anybody who enters a leadership position to pursue that kind of goal, to cause positive change by influencing others to their maximum performance. I think that's a most worthy call. I see leadership as being a privilege rather than a burden. Okay. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing if you are in a position where somebody says, we want you to lead. And so I think it's something that, first of all, I applaud anybody who enters positions of leadership because we need good leaders. We need people to step out from the pack and be bold with some courage to take the lead. in our society and organizations and families, in groups around the country. But servant leadership, I believe that leadership works best when there is service to others. And leadership works best when there is service to others. It's just that little extra perspective, that little different perspective on being a leader versus a servant leader that makes all the difference. Servant leadership, in my opinion, is an oxymoron. Those two words, servant and leadership, those are incongruous terms in our society today. There is tension between those terms.
Yeah.
Because a servant is someone who is seen at the bottom, helping others up the hill, helping others reach success. Society pictures a leader as being the top dog, a life of privilege, being catered to. And so there's some tension. It's a little bit of a tough sell to ask young people and just leaders in general to think of themselves at the bottom, pushing others up towards success. But if we do, leadership will work better if we see that kind of posture, that it's about serving others above self. And so that's how I distinguish the difference. Leadership causing maximum improvement, positive change, maximum performance. But servant leadership, just that little extra perspective, little different nuance of helping others up first is how I see the difference.
I love the visual of that. And you're right. It is a hard sell, right? And I love the awareness of, or how you pointed out that there's a tension in that. There's a tension in our culture at large. Often portrays leadership as power, or and in actuality, servant leadership it almost should be synonymous, right? Like leadership almost shouldn't exist without servant, a part of it, because I think true leaders recognize that leadership isn't about you or for you. It really is about helping others succeed and pushing others up. But that's not what you expect when you arrive into a leadership position, or at least that's my experience. Is I I had to take a few hard knocks to recognize that my whole perspective on leadership wasn't healthy or wasn't good in many ways. I was seeing it as power and position and opportunity for me, instead of seeing it as such a gift to help support the development and growth and draw out the best of others. So I love your distinction. I love the visual you created for us there.
Servant leadership begins with a conscious desire or conscious decision to serve others first. And none of us does that perfectly every day, obviously, because we are me-oriented creatures. We are very quick to think about ourselves before others. So it really is like turning the switch on a regular basis. It's a decision we have to wrestle with on a daily, I would even posit an hourly basis, that we are here in our organization to serve others. And we have to remind ourselves. And if we are serving others, leadership is going to be more effective.
That's so good. Do you have a story, Kent, of how that has played out for you? Like if you look at, just some of the moments in your leadership journey, maybe some of those moments you're most proud of as a leader that you'd be comfortable sharing with us. I'm putting you on the spot on that one, but.
Yeah. I'll go back to my baseball coach, and I saw authentic servant leadership the day that I struck out in the bottom of the seventh inning. Huge game at home. I was the last guy to bat. We lost the game by 1 run. Oh. And I was one of the last guys out of the locker room. And I was sitting in the parking lot, very dejected, loser, with my girlfriend at the time. And my baseball coach came out of the locker room, got in his car, and then drove to the street to go home. But then for some reason, he decided to make a U-turn and come back to where the loser was sitting. And he got out of his car and he came up to me, left his car running, came up to me, stuck out his hand and he said, "Slick, tomorrow's another day. Keep smiling, Smiley." He shook my hand, patted me on the shoulder, he got back in his car and he went home. That was a decision that he made. I mean, he lost the game. It would have been his 100th victory. And I struck out. But he thought enough about others to make that U-turn to come back and tell the 17-year-old adolescent with acne that I was okay. And because of that, again, I was inspired to become a teacher. And that's the ripple effect that servant leadership has throughout generations, because servant leadership is transformational, it's rare, and it's unforgettable when you see it.
That's amazing.
That would be an example where I saw, and there are countless others, but that's the first story that comes to my mind.
I love that. Yeah. Well, and again, how much those moments stick out for you when a leader does that, right? When a leader truly leads with servant leadership, the impact on that and the stories that stick with us for all those years is really pretty phenomenal. So I love that. So good.
Servant leadership, one of the truisms I embrace on servant leadership is that servant leadership, it works. If people change their focus to serving others above self, it works. Robert Greenleaf developed the servant leadership theory in 1970. He was a retired AT&T business executive, and he developed the servant leadership theory. And that theory is taught in business schools all over the country. Why? Because it works. Organizations like Chick-fil-A, In-N-Out Burger, Ritz-Carlton, Southwest Airlines, those organizations are very reputable organizations because they embrace the servant leadership theory. We at Concordia believe that servant leadership began a few thousand years before Robert Greenleaf. On the night in which Jesus was betrayed, he got down on his knees and he washed the feet of those disciples. Jesus Christ was the last person in that room that should have been on his knees washing feet. But he was the first guy and the only guy to get on his knees and wash those feet. And those disciples were so inspired, so motivated, and so committed to that servant leadership posture that they saw in Jesus Christ that they went around the world and spread the news of that servant leader to the point of today, we have roughly 2.4 billion Christians in our world today. Why? Because servant leadership works. It's transformational, unforgettable, and unfortunately, it's too rare in our society today.
That was part of what I was going to ask you about is what do you see in our culture today when it comes to servant leadership? How would you coach all of us on?
Jenny, I'll tell you, it's harder and harder to find authentic servant leaders. We have a lot of people doing things, nice things, to position themselves for advancements, right? Or to get votes in our country, instead of just doing the right thing of serving those people around them. So it's getting rare. It's getting more rare. It's hard to find servant leaders in professional sports, in Hollywood, in politics. But boy, when you see them, again, it's unforgettable. I was at the United States Air Force Academy for a leadership conference in February of this year, and I was attending one of the sessions. And we had a little time to kill before the first session began. And then there was this young female cadet sitting in front of me in her camouflage outfit suit. And I started a conversation. I said, "Good morning." And of course, she says, "Good morning, sir." And I asked her, "Where are you from?" And she told me, and I asked her this question: "Tell me, how did you pick the Air Force Academy to be the place you wanted to attend and to be the experience you wanted to participate in?" And then she said these words that I'll never forget. She said, "Sir, I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself.
Oh.
So it was so refreshing to see this young 18-year-old adolescent eager to serve, even to the point of giving her life for our country someday. And so you get glimpses of that servant leadership mentality out there, and it's refreshing, but unfortunately it's becoming more and more rare.
More and more rare.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you that I think it is very rare. And I have to wonder, so much of our culture right now is positioned to create influencers or to help people be a celebrity of some kind, because everybody has access to a microphone and a Instagram page and we can publish and create our own content and our own brands and so forth. And I wonder how much that has impacted we all want to be seen and we all want to be known, and rather than to serve. Do you see a correlation as you watched kind of that shift in our society?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the key virtues in being an effective servant leader is humility. And humility is, again, kind of a fleeting virtue in our society. It's more about me, the Instagram and make me look good. It's making me look as good as possible instead of that humble posture. And humility is such a precursor for all the other good things that a servant leader does. Humility is a precursor for compassion, listening skills, empathy, just concern for others. Humility is a building block, I think. And again, something that is hard to see in our society. It's been my experience. You ask about the leaders that have influenced my life. Humility has always been charismatic. When you come next to a humble leader, it's charismatic. You're attracted like a magnet. Arrogance, on the other hand, is repulsive. And when you come next to an arrogant person, all you want to do is bing. You want to escape. You want to get away. And the only time someone follows an arrogant leader is when they have to. No one chooses. No one wants to follow an arrogant leader. So humility. How do you teach that? I think that's the root of the question here. How do we see more of that? And I think it's having the conversation with young kids about the importance. You're gonna have a lot more friends if you develop a humble posture than an arrogant one. It's a hard,
powerful.
Hard to turn our society in that direction, but it's an important thing for us to do.
Yeah. When you're working with a lot of the students, young leaders at Concordia, what do they tell you they value in leaders? What's important to them when they think about leadership?
Yeah, that's really, really good. I guess I haven't ever asked that question specifically, but my observations would tell me that they value authenticity. They value leaders that know their names. They value leaders that ask some questions as opposed to just tell. I think they're so used to just being told what to do, and they've got great ideas. So authenticity, knowing their names, listening, asking questions, and genuinely listening to them. I think also a piece that needs to be demonstrated in leaders is some joy and some enthusiasm, because a lot of young adolescents don't aspire to be leaders because they have a hard time finding leaders who demonstrate joy in what they're doing. A lot of leaders are dragging themselves around and complaining about this and that. And so it behooves us as leaders, as we are concerned about raising up future servant leaders, demonstrate some joy as we serve. Demonstrate some enthusiasm in what we're doing.
Yeah, that's powerful. I love that. The authenticity, knowing people's names, listening, being joyful. I think that is such a big deal, right? Because it's not fun to follow somebody who's like just grumpy or too busy or preoccupied or not living into that fruit of the spirit of joy.
Right.
That's so significant. Gosh, Kent, this is so fun. I just was jotting lots of notes, as I bet our listeners were as well, because I was like, okay, I want to write that down. Just so many helpful and thoughtful nuggets. I'd love for our listeners to just learn a little bit more about some of the things that you're doing at Concordia, the Educator Leadership Academy. There's some other events you're doing. So just tell us about some of the projects that you're in the middle of.
Thank you so much for that question, Jenny. I currently serve as the director of the Servant Leadership Institute at Concordia University Irvine. And one of the initiatives of our Leadership Institute is to host an Educator Leadership Academy, where we host educators on our campus for 3 days in May and then 2 days in February, where they listen to a series of speakers speak about servant leadership and character. Basically, effective, exemplary servant leadership. And then we also have a high school leadership academy. We just hosted 77 rising 10th through 12th grade students on our campus in June for 1 week. They stayed in the dorms, ate in the cafeteria, and listened to a variety of excellent speakers and participated in a variety of activities. And again, the focus is on servant leadership and character, trying to raise up more effective servant leaders for the future. And those two academies you can learn more about on our website at Concordia University, cui.edu/SLI. cui.edu/SLI. And it's a real privilege to be able to be a part of those two initiatives here at Concordia. We're thrilled to see where those are going at this point in time.
Yeah. Kent, I love that. And again, just in the short time I've gotten to know you over the last handful of months or so, just seeing how intentional you are to model servant leadership and then to help develop it in others. And having done that across your career journey so far, and I can't imagine the number of students and young leaders that you've influenced. We're just so grateful. So while our culture needs to keep shifting more towards servant leadership, I know you're doing your part in helping equip young leaders to really embrace that philosophy. So thank you for investing in so many young leaders and then investing in us today. This was a privilege.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for what you're doing through your writing and speaking to impact countless lives. Thank you.
All right, friends, I hope you were taking as many notes as I was. I was frantically, you could see it if you're watching the video version of this, I was frantically scribbling notes the entire time because I didn't want to miss just some of those nuggets of wisdom that Dr. Schlichtemeier shared. And so I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it got you thinking about leadership. And there's probably a leader in your life who needs to hear this, right? Maybe a young leader that hasn't had that aha moment around the importance of leadership really being about others and not about us. I know that I have to be reminded of that frequently, but I remember the very distinct part in my early leadership days where I needed to hear that and I needed to be challenged by that. So maybe there's some leaders on your team that this would spark some really good conversation of that distinction between leadership and servant leadership. Encourage you to share it with them. Let me know what you thought of the episode. I always want your feedback. Let me know what was helpful, what you'd like to hear more of, what you'd like to hear less of. And you can connect with us on all social media channels at Get Foresight, GET, the number 4, SIGHT. Or you can also find me at Jenny Catron, JENNICATRON. Leave us a review. Let us know how you feel about the podcast. That's always super helpful. And then if you'd like some more leadership resources to help you on your journey, be sure to sign up for our free weekly Insights newsletter. You can find that at getforesight.com. That's GET, the number 4, SIGHT.com. On the screen there should be a little pop-up that says, Get the Insights newsletter. And again, it's just a great place where I am sharing ideas, thoughts, new releases, what we're doing at Foresight, and the tools we have to serve leaders. That's the first place you're always going to hear about it. So make sure you're signed up. And when we have a new podcast episode drop, it goes out to that list as well. All right, friends, thank you for listening today. Thank you for being committed to leading well. It matters. We need healthy, thriving leaders to build thriving teams. And as we learned from Dr. Schlichtemeier today, you never know the influence you're having with the people around you. And so the more we're learning and growing as leaders, the better positioned we are to steward that influence well. So keep leading well, and we will see you next week.